Got a new mic setup here, as you can see, got the boom arm and everything. I think this is gonna work out pretty nicely here. But anyways, guys, let's jump into this video. Today, we're gonna be doing a review on the Canon 80D for wildlife photography. This is a camera that was released all the way back in 2016, has a 24 megapixel sensor, and retails for about $900 brand new today. Now, as I stated a moment ago, this is not gonna be a review that covers this camera just generally as a camera, and it's not gonna go into portrait photography or wedding photography or anything like that. This is going to be a review that is solely for wildlife photography. This is going to discuss the Canon 80D as a wildlife photographer's camera. And so the things that I'm going to be focusing on in this video are going to be the things that are essential for wildlife photography and that are essential for taking good wildlife photos. And I'm going to basically talk about how the 80D performs in those fields and not how it performs overall, like I said, or not how it performs for portraits or landscapes or anything else, solely how the 80D performs as a wildlife photography camera. And the things that I think are most important for a good wildlife photography camera are a good sensor with good image quality, high ISO capabilities, a decently high frame rate, and most importantly, a good autofocus system. So those are the four things that we're going to talk about in this video and basically just cover how the 80D performs as a wildlife photographer's camera. And if you're looking to get into wildlife photography and want a good beginner level camera, is this Canon 80D a good camera to choose? So jumping straight into it, let's first talk about the sensor and the image quality on this camera. Like I said earlier, this does have a 24 megapixel sensor. And as you can see here, we're going to jump straight in with some example images. It delivers as a 24 megapixel sensor. Here's an image that I took the other day of my dog Pepper. And you can see here, if we just zoom in on his eye right where I had it focused, this is a very, very sharp camera that just really retains detail well. You can see each individual strand of fur there around his eye. You can see the detail in his eye. I mean, this thing just really retained all the detail on him. You know, you can see his whiskers down here. Just so much detail is captured with this camera. And with 24 megapixels for $900, I don't think there's anything I can complain about. This is a very, very sharp camera that produces very, very high quality images. And honestly, it's as simple as that. Obviously, you know, a 45 megapixel D850 or Canon R5 is going to be better than this. But for $900, 24 megapixels with this kind of image sharpness, I can't complain. This is going to win for me, especially for an entry-level wildlife photographer's camera. This is a wonderful camera to choose in terms of at least the sharpness and the image quality here. 24 megapixels is plenty enough for you to take good wildlife photos, so I have no complaints about that. I think image quality is great on this. So now we're going to move into the next field, which is going to be the high ISO capabilities, and the camera is going to lack a little bit here. It's not going to be great, but it's not going to be bad either. You'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. So first, let's take a look again at this same photo of my dog Pepper. And you can just kind of see this was shot at ISO 100, and you can see the detail retained around the eye, in the fur and all of that. And you can see that there's not too much noise at all going on in this photo. There's really not any noise. It's pretty dang solid. But then if I look over at an image like this of this prairie dog in the Badlands, this image was shot at 1250 ISO, which is kind of high, but is it that high? I mean, there are instances where you're going to be shooting a lot higher than that. With wildlife. So this is sort of a mid-level ISO, we'll say. It's not as low as 100, but you're not shooting at 5,000 or something, right? So 1250 ISO here, and going ahead and zooming in, you can see we've lost some detail for sure. If we go back over to Pepper here, yeah, you can see the difference here. It's just a lot more noisy and a little bit more blurry. You just lost some detail in it. And you can see these were both shot on the same lens at 400 millimeters f5.6, and this was shot at a 400th of a second. The one over here of Pepper was shot at 1/250th of a second, so not much difference there. So you can see that the lens is not the issue here. It's not causing this noise. It's the ISO that I've had to use here. You can see here with 100 ISO how much more detail you have retained and how much sharper the image is compared to this image. And you know, this prairie dog image isn't bad by any means, but it's noticeably worse than our one over here of Pepper. It's a noticeably worse image. And if you look at another prairie dog one right here, also shot at 1250 ISO, you can see that we're getting the same results here. It's still pretty sharp. You're still getting a good amount of detail, but it is somewhat noisy at the same time. So this isn't ideal, but there is somewhat of a solution to this. If you have good denoise software like Topaz Denoise AI, I'm going to be doing a video on that pretty darn soon here, and I've talked about it a couple of different times on the channel, but if you have software like that, you can recover a lot of these photos, especially like this photo here. I have this exact photo, but once it's been edited and has been denoised, and you can take a look at that right here. And you can see that, yeah, it's a lot better. And basically it's got the same sharpness as that image of Pepper with 100 ISO. So there are definitely ways that you can recover your images, right? There are definitely ways that even when you have to shoot at higher ISOs, you can bring that back and recover it and bring it to where it looks like a 100 ISO image. And so the fact that you can recover a lot of that detail is good and all, but the thing is, a lot of times you're not going to be shooting at 1250 ISO like this shot was. You're going to be shooting a lot higher with wildlife. Sometimes you're going to have to shoot up to, 4,000, 5,000 ISO, maybe even higher than that. And at that point, even when you denoise the image, it's going to be hard to recover and retain the same quality that you have in an image like this at 100 ISO. So for this camera, I'm going to say that the ISO capabilities are just okay. They're not bad, but they're not great either. They could be much better. And I still am not going to say, okay, you shouldn't get this camera for wildlife photography because the ISO capabilities are not good. I'm not going to go that far as to say that. I'm just going to say that not all of your wildlife shots are going to turn out as great as they could have with a camera that handles ISOs better. So it's just an okay camera for ISO handling capabilities. So that's it for ISOs. Now moving into our third thing that I think is very important for wildlife photography, we're going to talk about the frame rate on this camera. The Canon 80D can shoot at 7 frames per second, which is very much like the ISOs in that it's just okay. It's not bad, but it's not great either. There are cameras that can do a lot more. And you're going to be able to get some good wildlife shots with 7 frames per second and capture a lot of the action that's going on, but not all of it. And I'm going to showcase that right here with these images that I took in Yellowstone of the black wolf in Hayden Valley. And you can see here, and you can see some of these are out of focus. We'll get into that when we get into the autofocus system on this. But you can see here that as the wolf is crossing the road, you can see 7 frames per second. It's capturing most of the action here, but not quite all of it. Not as much as you might want. The gesture on this wolf's legs, for example, on these first 3 shots could be better. If I had, let's say, 10, 15 frames per second, I might have been able to capture that exact moment where his legs were in the exact position that I wanted them in for this photo. And so you can see right here that maybe, I've got all 4 legs out here. So I got lucky here, right? You can see all 4 legs. That's what you want in a good wildlife photo. But then the next one over, the 2 back legs are up, and that's not so great. Maybe if it had captured a frame in between these 2 where one of the back legs was up and the other one was not, maybe that would have been better. In some of these, like in this case right here, you're getting a pretty large jump right there. You're getting a large jump in the distance he moved. He was able to move from the yellow line right here all the way over to the white line before it fired off another frame. And now granted, he was running very fast in these images, but with a higher frame rate, you would have been able to capture that a little bit better. I may have also let off here. You never know when I may have let off. Paused for a moment, but overall you can see that 7 frames per second just can't quite capture all of the action that's seen. It can showcase some of it, but not all of it. And if you can get a camera with 10 or 11 frames per second or even 12 frames per second, that's going to be a lot better for this. It's going to be able to capture a lot more action, and you're going to be a lot more satisfied out of that. So again, just like the ISO capability for the Canon 80D, I think that 7 frames per second, it's okay. It's right there in the middle somewhere. And I don't think that it's going to drag you down that much. I don't think it's going to ruin your wildlife photography, but it is going to possibly lose you a shot or 2 because of the lower frame rate. So yeah, that's frame rate on this. And now we'll move into the 4th and final component that I think is an essential thing that a camera has to be good at to take good wildlife photos, and that is a good autofocus system. Now the Canon 80D has a 45-point autofocus system, and it is the dual pixel CMOS AF system from Canon, which is a decent system. And you're going to see that recurring theme here where this autofocus system is good, but not great. And not bad by any means, but it's not all the way up there. It's a mid-level thing, and I'll show you again these same exact wolf images of the wolf crossing the road to showcase this. So you can see on these first few, my focus is not great, but it's decent. It's in the same area as the wolf there as he's running across the road. And again, that's just because this is not the greatest autofocus system. It hasn't nailed my focus as the wolf is running out in front of me. I had my autofocus point right there on his head. This is not user error. This was just the fact that it's not perfect when this wolf was running very fast in front of me. It can't always nail it. But it's generally in the area there. However, as you can see, as the wolf crosses the road here, we lose focus right here. We lose focus back on the hillside, and you can see that the camera is locked back in here on this little dirt patch in the sagebrush and has totally moved off my wolf and has lost focus. And at this point, I was putting the autofocus point right back on the wolf, but it was searching. It was hunting and could not find focus here. And same thing as the camera came across, you can see that the focus is kind of somewhere back here in the road, not on the wolf, not in front of it. It's still searching. My camera can't find it as the wolf is crossing the road. Still can't find it, still searching. It's locked on again to this dirt patch back here. It seems to really want to pick out those contrasty spots in the background instead of locking onto the wolf. And that's what it's doing here by locking onto these, you know, brown dirt patches in the sea of green grass. I think that's why it was locking onto those areas. And again, still missing, and finally here it catches it up, and it actually catches the wolf right here. So you can see by these images that the autofocus system isn't great. It could be much better, and it's gonna miss you some shots. I can guarantee you that. It is going to miss you some shots. No matter how good you are with the focus, and you know how great you are at nailing the autofocus point right on your animal, it's going to miss you some shots sometimes in certain situations. Not always. It's still a good system, and there are still situations where it nailed focus for me. For example, take a look at this image. Pepper was static here. Obviously, he was standing still, but still, I put this right on him, and it was literally in a split second. This had locked focus right on his eye. Nailed focus. Same thing over here with these prairie dogs. Nailed focus right on this prairie dog as soon as I locked it on it. But when you get a moving subject like this wolf, it struggles a lot more and has a harder time picking up autofocus. And I think that's where you're going to see your autofocus struggle. I think with static subjects or, you know, animals that are slow moving and are pausing every now and then, your Canon 80D is going to be able to keep up with those animals and keep a good autofocus point on that animal and produce consistently sharp photos. But I think when you're getting a fast moving animal, like a wolf running across the road, or maybe you're in Africa on a safari and you've got a cheetah chasing after a gazelle, it's going to be very hit and miss. I think you're going to get some shots, but you're not going to get all the shots. So that's just one of the things that comes with it. Again, you know, like I said, it's a $900 camera, so it's not the very best. You know, you've got $4,000 cameras that are going to nail your autofocus every time. But for $900, it's going to get it in most instances, and it's always going to get it with a slow-moving animal. But when you get into those fast-moving animals, 80D is going to miss sometimes, unfortunately. And again, all the images that you've seen here were shot on the Canon 100-400 Mark II lens, which is a stellar lens with stellar autofocus. So the lens was not the issue here. I can guarantee you that. This was the camera's issue. This was the autofocus system in the camera that was causing us to miss some of these shots. So yeah, that's basically it, guys. That's my thoughts on the Canon 80D. I think that for the $900 price range, you're getting great megapixel count there for 24 megapixels and awesome image quality. You're getting okay ISO handling capabilities and okay frames per second out of the Canon 80D. And the autofocus system is, again, okay. It could be better, and it's definitely going to miss you some shots, but it's not bad by any means. You know, you're shooting a fast-moving subject, probably going to get 50-50 on your shots. But if you're shooting a slow-moving subject or a static subject, you're going to get 100% sharp shots. So for wildlife, obviously, we do shoot a lot of fast-moving subjects as wildlife photographers, so you're going to want that capability, and you're not always going to get it, but it's going to get it sometimes for you. So for $900, I can't complain that much. And basically, to sum up my final thoughts on this, the Canon 80D is, I think, a good beginner wildlife photography camera, even up to intermediate level wildlife photography camera. This isn't, you know, your entry-level Rebel series of Canon cameras. This isn't that entry-level stuff. This is better than that, but it's not quite pro either. This is a serious hobbyist, pre-pro wildlife photography camera. I think that's where the 80D fits perfectly, and I think for $900, you're getting a good wildlife photography camera. I think it's a good deal on this, and I would recommend for any wildlife photographer looking for a good camera that's under $1,000, honestly, I think the 80D would be my first choice. I think this is a very, very good camera for that price range, for entry-level wildlife photography, or even, like I said, intermediate level. I think this is a really good choice. However, that said, I do have a little bit of a problem that I want to go ahead and cover with the 80D. So when I bought this camera, it was I think $1,100, and picked it up. I'm happy with it still, but today it's $900, and the Canon 90D has dropped to $1,200 for the body only. We're talking about body only here on the 90D and the 80D. So you have the 80D right now at $900, the 90D at $1,200, so $300 more. And my problem is that I actually think the 80D, considering the price of the 90D, should be a little less. The 90D with 32 megapixels and 4K video, obvious choice. Pay the extra $300 and get that camera for wildlife photography, because all the other systems are the same. It's got the same autofocus system. ISO handling is pretty darn similar. If you go, there's a couple of videos out there on YouTube that cover the difference in the 80D and the 90D and their ISO capabilities. Pretty darn similar. Overall, they're very, very similar, except that on that 90D, you're getting 8 extra megapixels, which is huge in wildlife photography because that allows you to crop in so much more on images where the wildlife is far away. And you're getting 4K video capabilities. So for somebody like me that does YouTube, that would be so much nicer than the 1080p that I'm shooting on right now. So I really think that if you're thinking about getting a wildlife photography camera that is a somewhat budget camera, you know, it's not a $300 camera, but it's not a $4,000 camera either, I think you should pay the extra $300 and go for the 90D. The 80D I still think is a good price for $900. I think the quality of camera that you're getting for $900 is still worth it when you have the option to pay $300 extra and get that 32 megapixels in 4K video, especially if you're somebody like me who is just as much a videographer as they are a photographer and likes producing videos as much as they like producing photos. $300 extra for the 90D is a no-brainer. Now, like I mentioned, that doesn't mean the 80D isn't still a good price for $900, but I think the only way that the 80D would actually be worth it, and the only way that I would think that you should save your money and not buy the 90D and buy the 80D is if it was instead $800 and was $400 less than the 90D. With it only being $300 less, I think you should go for the 90D. So that's my little problem with it. And I'm kind of regretting my decision to buy the 80D because I really wish this had 4K video, or really wish I could produce my YouTube videos in 4K. But I'm still happy with this camera and I'm still going to be shooting on it and still am able to produce what I think are good videos and photos. But I think if you're looking at buying a new camera, don't make the same mistake as me. Go ahead, pay that little bit of extra money and get the 90D. So yeah, that's my review on the Canon 80D. I think it is a great camera for entry level all the way up to intermediate level wildlife photography. And you're able to produce some very good images with it. You're going to lose some shots with it that you would get with a pro level camera, but that's expected out of a camera that's under $1,000. So it's a good camera. Not the best, but a very good intermediate level camera. So anyways, that is going to be all for this video, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have stuck around at this point, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, please do not forget to like and share this video with your friends and comment down below and let me know what you all thought. And most importantly, as always, subscribe to be entered for that 1,000 subscriber manatee swim giveaway. Going to be pretty epic. So subscribe to be entered for that, and I will see you all in the next video. So that is it, guys, for this video. Thank you all so much for watching.